This is the Behringer Model D. It's my go-to bass synth. I've been using it on projects for the past 2 years, and 90% of the time it is the bass sound on what we're doing. It just has that flavor that I really dig. So in this video, I'm gonna try to explain what that is as best as I can and show you some examples and maybe some tips and tricks as well for performing. Yeah, so the way this is currently set up, this is how this sounds at the moment. Very Moogish, right? Even though it's a Behringer. It's obviously not a Moog synth. There is a few reasons why that sound comes out of the Model D. In order to break that down, we probably need to go over a quick overview. So as you can see, it's got 3 oscillators. The thing about these type of synthesizers is that the oscillators are not synced to any kind of reference tuning. So oscillator 1 is dedicated to the tune knob right here. And then the rest of the oscillators, oscillator 2 and 3, are their tuning is referenced to the tuning of oscillator 1. But there is no like, here is for sure the dedicated tuning of where these oscillators need to be. You have to let the synth warm up for about 5-10 minutes or so it hits ambient temperature. And then once it's there, you can then tune it. So they got a nice little tune thing here. So that's like roughly in tune, you know? What I really like about this is that it allows you to be loose on the tuning on stuff because that sounds fatter. It sounds more interesting in the mix when things aren't perfectly dead in tune. Like if you hear a regular bassist playing a upright bass or flat wound bass or something like that, there's a lot of intonation that gets pushed and pulled and all that with a regular bassist. And even though the Model D clearly can't do exactly that with the keys and all that, there's a subtle hint towards that with the fact that the oscillators don't remain ultra tuned all the time. So that's step 1 of sounding like a super fat analog bass. Typically, I like to have the oscillators be slightly out of tune from each other, just a bit. No, that sounds more dead in tune with each other or very close. Just like to give it a little character. Just sounds so much better detuned. I mean, everybody knows detune your second and third oscillator for more fatness, but on the Model D especially. So yeah, the first ingredient is the oscillators and how they're loosely tuned. They're not dead in tune. And there's no sync option, so you can't like sync oscillator 2 and 3 to oscillator 1. So you're always kind of guesstimating where the tuning is with oscillator 2 and 3. Next up, you got the mixer section, and it's a basic mixer. There is this the trick where in the old Minimoog, they would patch in like the headphones or whatever into the external and then increase the external gain to create like a feedback overdrive type of scenario with the synth. This has it automatically patched in. Interestingly, if you do actually patch the phones into the external, you get a different type of feedback. You can actually get more aggression in there because what I've found right now with it not being patched at all, the between 6 and 7 seems to be the sweet spot. So let me just take it out completely. This obviously sounds like a fat bass, which is great. If I kick this in, you can hear like around 100 to 200 hertz increase of boost. Just subtly lost a little weight. Bit fatter. So the way I look at the external input volume is that if I need it to be just a bit more polite than the typical how I'm usually routing it, then I either take that out or just rock it back. And then it becomes another source of like modulation or not modulation, but like gain or texture that happens during performance because I can ride this. Make it fart out. nice aggressive tones, right? But they're still musical. I think that's one of the interesting things is it's not going into like pure distortion or just straight up like fuzz or something like that. It still has really low fat end. Fat. It's got a low fat end, but it's still musical. It wants to play with a beat. So yeah, this external volume thing plays a big role in getting fat sounds, fat, juicy bass sounds, leads as well. About that time in the video where I have to ask you to subscribe and ring the notification bell and leave a comment and like button. Where was I? Right, talking about the overview. I get lost in synthesizers so easily. So next part that adds to the equation of making a nice fat bass out of the Model D is the filter. It's the ladder filter. It's a very famous design and for good reason. It has a distinct character that gives it this like gummy, rubber bandy type of like that roundness, I guess. I guess that's what it is. It's a sum of all the parts, but like the filter really adds this round texture. Because if you just bring up the filter completely, it's a big sound. I have 3 octaves, obviously, from the way the oscillators are at the moment, so that's adding to the big sound. When I start pulling back the filter, yeah, it's got this nice round rubber band type of feel. Now, I do have the glide on as well, so that helps to that rubber band effect. But there's something about the actual tone. That filter just has this like character to it. The more you listen to these things, the more you pick up on those type of little nuances of the way the filters feel and all that, and the more they kind of influence your musical decisions in a mix. So the filter cutoff frequency, I'm always riding this thing because it's got tons of character. You can connect it to the modulation wheel if you want, or mod depth. One thing about the Behringer Model D specifically is they have the mod depth thing right here. Actually, this could be on other versions of Model Ds, but I don't know. I've never had a real Model D from Minimoog. They're super expensive, and yeah. So this mod depth wheel you could use for the modulation. The modulation wheel, though, on your keyboard technically is supposed to override it. Sometimes this gets a little finicky, though. I've noticed they don't play nice sometimes. Sometimes the modulation wheel tries to take over, and the mod depth can make it weird. So could be a little bug right there. You probably just want to use the modulation wheel in general, because you can automate that in things like the MPC Live as well. So where was I? Right, the filter. Sorry, getting distracted here. So between the cutoff frequency, there's also the emphasis, which is basically resonance in modern day terms. The emphasis really sucks out the bass end. So hear that? A lot of bass gets lost. It's got great character. Let me turn it all the way down now. Our bass is back. So I use the emphasis sparingly for that very reason, because the more emphasis I put in there, the less bass I have. It's great for like an accent if you can actually ride the knobs when you're performing it. But in general, I'm usually keeping it around 0 to 2 for typical bass patches, because I definitely want that low end feel in there. Now, next up from emphasis, you have amount of contour, which is going to give you attack, decay, sustain things into the way the filter actually moves right there. Obviously, attack is how fast it hits the peak. Decay is actually release in this case, but it's because this is like an old school synth design. So decay really means like how long the tail is going to be. And sustain is if you're holding the note, it'll go up and then it'll sustain at that point. Let's give some examples here. So if I drop the cutoff all the way down and crank the contour, immediately opens up and closes down to the sustain level. If I increase the sustain level, see, that's the decay right there. Now let's increase the attack. So now you'll hear a long sweep. Well, let's go longer, 5 seconds. So very almost like double bass type of feel to it right there. Obviously useful for kind of soundtracky type of or ambient type of things going on right there. I typically don't use those long attack times for the filter because I'm almost always doing some sort of like some kind of pseudo funky type of thing. A little bit goes a long way, obviously, with this stuff. So same thing for the loudness contour. So one thing I do find with the loudness contour is having the sustain maxed out helps with the aggression of the synth. Because if you drop the sustain down, you definitely get more dynamics. So for faster tempo, faster BPM type of tracks, keeping the sustain probably around 2 to 5 helps for some push-pull type of feel. Yeah, tracks that are maybe mid-tempo or slow tempos. I feel like keeping the sustain maxed out so you can kind of increase that punch that happens right there. I was originally talking about the 3 ingredients that make this synth sound a certain way. It does. Between the oscillators, the external input, and the filter design, the ladder filter, those give this like this round bottom, gummy, rubber bandy type of feel to it, regardless of the glide. I know the glide is helping with that rubber band. And that makes me want to reach for this synthesizer all the time. Because it's Behringer, obviously, it's like super cheap in comparison, because it's like probably 330 bucks, something like that. There's alternatives out there as well. I know Roland has a SE02, which I actually haven't used before. I know that it's got like mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people don't like it. It's also got presets as well. Like if you really need presets, the Roland SE02 has that option, and it's got some effects in there. I feel like having the Model D though, a more traditional design, has made me more aware of sound design and options, and the tweakability has like inspired me more to tweak other synths in general. I've been aware of synthesis for a long time and the principles, but having something like the Model D just be so straightforward and simple, but yet produce such amazing tones out the door, kind of inspires me to want to experiment more in general. So I don't know, it's an interesting thing of limitations creating more inspiration. So speaking of sounds, another reason why I reach for this for bass synths is all the waveforms I feel like are great for bass sounds. For instance, right now we're basically rocking like a square pulse type of thing. If I put them all to triangle, this is what they sound like. feel like that's very usable. All triangles. Just as usable as where I was with the square waveforms. The square waveforms are definitely adding more bite. They got more harmonic energy that's going on in there. Let's go next one. This one's a bit more polite. Let's go to Sawtooth. And then my personal fave is to mix and match. So we could take this stuff, maybe go like that. So we got a square, sawtooth, and a triangle with various octaves. Like they all work. Let's go to the third square. Ooh, that's square. I love that square. It all works. It just nails it, in my opinion, across the board. And the leads as well, even though I don't use this for leads nearly as often, mainly because I'm always putting this towards bass duties. Now with this particular design, I'm using the 3 octave. You know, I've got like the 32 foot, 16 foot, 8 foot, which by the way, the reason why they're marked in feet is because it's like pipe organs. So the longer the pipe organ, the lower the tone it was. Like if you take the length of the pipe and you cut it in half, then you have 1 octave higher. And so that's why they're marked in feet. The peak is marked that way too. You got 16, 8, 4, 2 feet, all that. But yeah, in this particular setup, I'm doing 32, 16, and 8. I can make them all 32. Detune a bit. Super dark and moody. Did I? Whoops. I actually only had 2 of them at 32. Now there's all 3. There it is. Now we're dark and moody. That is a very thick bass. So yeah, I typically like to have a couple octaves in there. You can go pretty extreme with this. Let's try the 2 feet. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of stuff like that. More my style. In fact, let's go back to regular square in the low one. We'll go saw on the 2nd octave. For such a simple design, it's just endless potential in there. And I'm not even using like the modulation stuff. Like you can switch out oscillator 3 to frequency modulate like the whole thing. I typically don't use the 3rd oscillator for modulation because like I just find what I get already with the basic setup here for modulation is already good enough. Like if I do want to get vibrato in there. In fact, a quick and easy way to add vibrato is just have, you have your LFO rate up to maybe between like 4 and 6 or something like that. You make sure mod mix is all the way over to LFO. Make sure obviously the actual source is to LFO as well. And then make sure oscillator modulation is clicked on right here. And then if you have modulation filter clicked on, you'll hear the filter go up and down as well. But so you can switch it off if you want. But then as you increase mod depth, hear some wiggle. Super easy to do vibrato. I'm actually a big fan of using the modulation with the filter personally. So typically I keep the oscillator modulation out and keep the filter modulation in, because that can add just enough character. I'm sure by now you guys are sick of hearing that bass line. So to round out this video, I want to talk about some performance tips. You've basically been seeing me do them the whole time during this video. I think the real power in this is being able to actually just adjust things on the fly, which is obvious, totally, but it's especially great for this synth because it's so simple to grab things. So let me see if I have a different beat on here. Don't know if that's obvious or not, but just the simple, like doing your own automation, essentially, you becoming the automator when it comes to these instruments for tracking them and recording them or performing them live. That's obviously very powerful. I think one thing that I've been trying to get better at is grabbing the oscillator knobs and detuning and tuning back in during performances. I feel like I'm still pretty not there. Definitely not there yet with it, but I'm trying personally to get better at being able to tweak oscillator knobs at the same time and get really musical, useful sounding changes in a performance. So I'm working on that. One thing I haven't even mentioned is there's Eurorack patches on here, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I never use those patches. They're totally useful, these patch points. Like you can grab the envelope curve out, you can grab LFO points out as well. You can patch in LFOs, you can patch in regular CV pitch information into the oscillators. I just don't use it. Like I have it plugged directly into the MPC Live here, and I have no need to patch in other stuff currently because it's like it just sounds good the way it is. It's like when you buy a guitar or a bass or a piano or something, like it has a sound to it, and you reach for that sound because it does that function really well. And I feel like the Model D is totally in that category for me. Like the bass function in it fits that brush so well when I want to paint with that like, why would I reach for anything else at the moment? Unless I'm specifically trying to be more creative in a particular area or do some sound design type of stuff. When that particular sound is working, like I'm going to reach for that acoustic guitar or electric guitar or bass again and again because I know it's going to perform a certain way for me. And I mean, a lot of synthesizers that I have perform in that sense as well. But this video is about the Model D. And on that note, it's time to wrap it up. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you liked it, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff, notification bell, leave a comment because the algorithm, you got to poke it, stab it, jab it, whatever, you know. Also, we appreciate all the support that's been on the channel so far. You guys are incredible. And yeah, looking forward to making more music, more jams, more videos. Let me know in the comments also if you have a particular topic that you'd like to hear more about. I'm curious. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time. Deuces.